You are the young wisdom group?
Some of us already.
Okay, I'm going to start by asking a question. What is wisdom? It's alright, there's no real right or wrong answers. You won't get told off if you get it wrong. It's just a way to start a conversation. Anybody want to start the ball rolling idea about what wisdom might be?
I'll take a look at it. Well, it's in a way similar to intelligence, but it's not, because intelligence is more related to like book studies. But wisdom, I feel like, I don't want to say it's common sense, but it's more like understanding the world around you and like how to react to it in a certain direction that will cause people to.
So how to respond in the best possible way to the world around you and the things that happen in life.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. Anybody else? One I find a good way of approaching this kind of question is to look at the other side. When you think about what's wisdom and you get stuck, then you say, what's the opposite of wisdom? And what's that like?
Ignorance? Ignorance?
Ignorance of what?
Suffering.
Ignorance
Also
of
suffering.
Yeah. So what would be an example of unwise behavior? Any example of unwise behavior?
Reckless driving.
Reckless driving. Okay, so why would that be unwise?
Because we wouldn't be mindful of the consequences of the action.
So wisdom is bearing in mind the consequences of our actions. That's another good point.
Maybe it's also understanding the reason behind the action.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Anything else from mature wisdom students?
Ignorance can be something that, or anything that you do that leads to, more unhappiness in your life.
That's a good one, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because that depends, doesn't it, on your ideas about life. So, if you told someone to go to a monastery, you have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to meditate, they maybe say, well, that increases the unhappiness in my life. What about levels of wisdom? Are there levels of wisdom? Are they all on the same level? Is it useful to make a kind of hierarchy? Would you like to come and sort of join in so we're all close together and feel like one group?
There's always more room to become more wise. Because I really think a brief of it and
That's certainly a wise attitude, isn't it? Any teacher has said to people who it's most difficult to teach are the people who think they know already. You always think you've got something more to learn. In fact, one of the words that the Buddha used to refer to arahants, the fully enlightened being, is the graduate. So as the one who doesn't have anything more to learn. So obviously it's the conclusion that everyone except for Arahants has something more than you to learn. Wisdom itself, in English, it's not such a good term. It's sort of saddled with it now, I think. Although Ajahn Jeff uses discernment, but I don't like either, really. Is there a better word in Vietnamese? Are you all Vietnamese speakers?
Most of us.
What about it? What's the equivalent in Vietnamese? Is it the same as the English wisdom?
Yeah.
Almost the same.
Because if you speak to like an English or American person, you say wisdom, they don't really. It makes me think of Harry Potter or something like that. It's not really very clear. I think. Okay, well I'll contribute something. See, one of the ways of talking about wisdom is to treat three areas or categories. And these have, I don't know if you're interested in like Pali words and Pali terms, but the first one is called Suttamaya Panya, which means panya or wisdom that comes from listening. So that's obviously not just restricted to listening, also reading and studying. So it's the kind of accurate knowledge of life, both internal, external, that we can use. So, it'd be really tough if every single person had to put their hand into a flame to prove to themselves that it burns your hand. So if someone who has burnt a hand or knows someone who's burnt their hand says, look, don't put your hand in the flame, it's not a good idea. That's wisdom, isn't it? I mean, that's useful knowledge that saves you suffering and probably in America a hefty medical bill. So it's a good thing to know. And there's a lot of knowledge like this, which is, if it has a beneficial effect on your life, then we will give it the name of wisdom. Now the second kind of wisdom, panya, occurs when we hear things from here and from there, and we read things, and we sit and we reflect on them, and insights arise. Oh yeah, we have some new understanding. It's like you get a red and you get a white, you mix it together and you get a pink, and that pink wasn't there to begin with. So you take ideas and an idea from this person or from that book, and that sheds a new light on something you read over here or you heard over here. Makes you look at things in a fresh way, fresh perspectives, fresh insights. This is a kind of wisdom also, which we call Jintamaya Panya. So Jinta means like thought, imagination. So the first kind of level of wisdom is from absorbing information, remembering it. The second is from using your thought, your reflective capacity, your intelligence to process this information and to maybe create something new from it, or to have some new understanding arising from it, which wasn't there in the basic information you received. So you see, like in biographies of great scientists, where they looking in nature or something, and they see something and they grasp the basic principle of it, and then create some kind of experiment in their laboratory and come up with something new. Now, the those two kinds of wisdom are flawed. Essentially because they are mental constructs, they are called sankharas, or conditioned phenomena, and they can very easily be eclipsed or nullified, particularly by times when there's strong emotion. So, let's say in the case of like you're studying for an exam and you're pretty smart and you know all your subject, but that you get filled with anxiety about what would happen if you don't pass your exam. And that anxiety is so strong that it affects your thinking power. And you can't remember, you can't work efficiently because the emotion is so strong. So that's a weakness of that level of understanding or wisdom. But the weakness of it becomes most apparent when it's information or knowledge, wisdom relating to our experience of happiness and suffering in the world. We hear the Buddha's teaching that one day we're going to be separated from everyone we love. Absolutely inarguable, isn't it, that one day we're going to be separated from our parents, grandparents, husbands, wives, girlfriends, sons, daughters, everyone. Either they'll die before we do, or we die before they do. That's the only unsure thing. Unless you die in a plane crash, you all die together. But that's not. So that's good to know, isn't it? Good to reflect on. Because when you reflect, you think, you use this preliminary level of wisdom again and again and again, then it affects how you relate to people around you. Like when I was a teenager, like most teenagers, a bit rebellious, and my parents were very happy with me. I had long hair, and they didn't like my clothes, and I thought it was nothing to do with them. It's my body, my hair, who are you to tell me what to do about something private like this? So we had a fair amount of conflict. And then afterwards I went to India. I was away for a couple of years, came back and joined a monastery. And after a few months in a monastery in England, I went to Thailand, and it was 6 years before I saw my parents again. And we were my parents came to the monastery in England to pick me up, take me home for a visit. And we were sitting in the car, and I was thinking, how ridiculous that I spent those few years at home, few precious years in conflict with my parents, and now I've chosen a way of life which I live thousands of kilometers, thousands of miles away from them, and see them so rarely. And it seems such a shame that I would have wasted that time in conflict over something like hair, when now I don't have any at all, so what was the point of it? And I regretted that I let that time pass in such a way. And while I was thinking about this, my mother, who was sitting in the front seat, she turned around and she said, I was just thinking that we made such a fuss about the length of your hair, clothes you were wearing when you were at home. They never imagined that from the age of 17, we wouldn't see you again for years on end. If I could go back now, I would never have made such a fuss. Just such a stupid thing. So this is called hindsight, isn't it? Being wise after the event. we can all look back and think, we could have done that so much better, and used the time so much better. But at the time, we couldn't think that way. We were just too caught up in our sense of self and our ideas about what's right and what's wrong, and so on and so forth. But the wisdom that we try to develop initially through reflection, we just don't have any guarantees at all. We don't have any guarantees how much longer our parents are going to be alive. We don't have any guarantees at all about how much time we're going to be with the ones we love. And for that reason, that time is precious. If we were Devas living in heavenly realm, where lifespan is measured in millions of years, you could sulk for 1,000 years, it wouldn't really matter in the big picture of things. But we don't live like that. Our life is very fragile. Our bodies are very fragile. And we live in a very uncertain world. It's like our life is led on the ice, and we have no idea how thick that ice is, to what extent it can sustain our weight. Where is the thin ice? We don't know. Is the ice melting? We're not really sure. I think it is, but probably not so much over there as here. But through reflecting and that things can change at any moment, things we take for granted can disappear from life. It's not a way that people like to think, is it? You'll find that's depressing. Don't think like that. But it's not depressing. Far from it. Because when you see the value of time, the time that you have, and how precious it is, you want to spend that time in the best possible way, and you realize it's just not worth going into a sulk or getting upset on such a small thing as this. We spend so much time upset with each other, angry with each other over things which is just so insignificant. But because nobody wants to admit defeat, wants to have the victory, these things drag on and on and on. So hearing this about the uncertainty of life and reflecting on it, these two kinds of wisdom are very important, valuable in our lives. But in the case that, hope this never happens to you, but let's say there is sudden separation from one you love. You're bereaved or separated some other way. Most people, even though they know that this is inevitable and could happen at any moment, are still completely emotionally unprepared for it and find it extremely difficult to handle. So this is the weak point or the flaw of these first two kinds of wisdom. For this reason, the Buddha taught the Bhavanamaya Panya, the third kind of wisdom. And that's the wisdom that arises from cultivation and from meditation. So in Asian languages, we don't make this hard and fast separation between heart and mind. We have this word citta, and it's very difficult to translate, because when you translate it as heart, then in English you tend to be emphasizing the emotions. But if you translate it as mind, you seem to be excluding the emotions. There's always been a problem for translators, because it's a unitary concept in Asian languages such as Pali and Thai, and not in Western languages. But nevertheless, we can make use of this conceptual framework and say that meditation creates a bridge between the mind and the heart. It allows us to digest and to process and to integrate and to make real these words of wisdom that we receive from our teacher and which we reflect on daily. This same trip from the English monastery to my parents' home, my mother seemed to be uncomfortable for some reason, and then she mentioned the name of my oldest friend, and we'd been kind of rebels together. He was a bit older than me, and I'd always looked up to him, and my parents didn't like him because I looked up to him. And then I left school and worked and saved some money and hitchhiked to India, and I didn't see him for almost 2 years. I came back from India, we met, and I ended up moving out of my parents' house and moving in with him in his flat. We spent some time together. And it was interesting because although the age difference was still the same, the whole dynamic had changed, because now I'd done this incredible thing and traveled around the world by myself and been away 2 years and had all kinds of experiences, and he'd been more or less where he'd always been. And I realized someone that I looked up to, now I could see things I couldn't see before, and I saw how insecure he was, and how he had this deep feeling that he couldn't ever do anything in his life. He would never achieve anything. And so I thought, I got to do something about this. This is my friend. So I said, look, what we'll do, we'll hitchhike, or we'll find some way, and we'll go to Sicily and pick oranges in the orange orchard and make some money during the winter and come back. I just done something like this. I got back from India and I didn't have any money, so I didn't want to take money from anyone. So after a short while, I hitchhiked to Switzerland and worked on a farm for 6 weeks, made quite a lot of money, and came back. So I thought, do this with my friend, Sicily rather than Switzerland. So happened we had a friend, a married couple. The woman was Italian. They had 2 plane tickets to Italy, and they said, you can take them. So it seemed like everything was working out. In those days, they said they're not very strict about comparing the passport and the ticket name. You'll be okay. It's just a cheap flight in Europe. We got to the airport and we were arrested under the Prevention of Terrorism Act and grilled by the police for a number of hours. So this confirmed my friend's belief that me on my own go anywhere as soon as he's there, hopeless. So I said, no, we're still going to go. I've got a few savings, we can do that. We can hitchhike a bit, go by trains, we'll get there. And we did. We got to Sicily in January, early January. It was pouring with rain. And they said, the harvest has been postponed for a month. So we didn't have enough money to stay in Sicily, so we went all the way back to England. And my friend was totally confirmed that he's a hopeless case. And eventually I had to give up. I just couldn't help him. And then I joined the monastery and went to Thailand. And after I'd been in Thailand for about 2 or 3 years, I got a postcard from him from Houston. And he had an uncle. He said, I've cut my hair, I'm wearing a suit and a tie, I'm working in an office in downtown Houston. My uncle's got me a job and everything going well. So I was very happy for him. So now fast forward another 3 years, in the car, going back home, and my mother tells me that my friend is called Bat. He, on his lunch break from his office downtown Houston, he went into a pizza store, ate a pizza, got food poisoning, fell down dead in the middle of the road. He's 28. So my mother thought, she really found it difficult, hesitated to tell me this. And I heard it, and my initial feeling was this very calm, cool, what we call salot sangwe, this very sober sadness, but not a sad sadness. It's kind of if I could say, a wise sadness. Because for years now, I've been studying life and looking at the uncertainty of life, both in the sort of the macro level of lives and monasteries and societies, but also on the individual level and the internal level of the arising and passing away of mental states. So arising and passing away, birth, old age, sickness and death were the things that I've been studying day in, day out, every hour of every day for 6 years, 7 years. And so when I heard the death of a close friend, or my closest friend, it just seemed to me to reaffirm the truths that I've been reflecting, contemplating, meditating upon for the past several years. So there wasn't that sense of grief, because the wisdom of the inevitability of change, the uncertainty of life, had been integrated into my whole being to such a level that I was able to deal with such news in such a way. So this is some indication of these different kinds of wisdom. If we're going to sum up wisdom in one short phrase, it would be the understanding that reduces or eliminates suffering and its cause. So some people say, you see, I was so angry, I knew I was angry, but I just couldn't stop. But that's not really what happens, because if you're angry, you don't know, and if you know, you're not angry. So there can be this kind of alternation between them, but you can't have the two things at the same time, because wisdom is the letting go of self, sense attachment to things as self or belonging to self, can only take place in the absence of wisdom. So wisdom is that particular knowledge and understanding which reduces or eliminates suffering and its cause, craving. Okay, time for you to say something.
I actually have a question.
Yeah.
Recently in our Dhamma group, we kind of rate ourselves in like the quality. Where are you in like heedfulness? Samvega, stuff like that. So the quality of heedfulness is one thing that I struggle in rating myself with, because sometimes I feel like I'm very heedful, but there's other times where I'm not. Yeah. And for what is your advice as far as beginner meditator or young meditator like us to help sustain our energy and effort in the path?
Yeah, I've been talking about effort quite a lot last week or so, and suggesting that the 4 right efforts provide a comprehensive framework for our life as Buddhists, our studies and education. And so the 4 right efforts, the effort to prevent the arising of negative, unwholesome mental states that have not yet arisen, the effort to reduce, eliminate those that have arisen, the effort to create in the mind those wholesome states that have not yet arisen, and to care for and to nourish and to bring to maturity those that have already arisen. So whatever situation you're in, and whether you're in a very conducive situation, like a cool, peaceful, quiet, congenial atmosphere like this, or you're in the middle of the city, there's always one of these 4 efforts you can be putting into your life. you don't ever have to be like a victim of circumstance, or just to flow along with the heedless stimulus from outside, because this is a society and a culture which is built on stimulation and heedlessness rather than heedfulness. So you're going against the stream, and don't take like tension or stress to be a thing that's automatically bad. I mean, if you're I had a lesson this from Ajahn Cha himself when I was first in his monastery, and he was very good at teaching people he didn't speak any English, of course. He was very good at teaching people who didn't speak much Thai, so I'd only been there for a couple of weeks or something. And I had a few words of Thai. And one of the greetings in Thai is Sabai di re, so Sabai means like comfortable, and Sabai di means very comfortable. So basically, are you very comfortable? And you say yes. So I was sweeping leaves in the forest, and Ajahn Cha at the time was still walking with his walking stick, and he'd come around and just check everything out. And he couldn't pronounce the Western names very well, so he used to have nicknames for everyone. So my name is Sean, and he couldn't, Thais couldn't make the shut sound, so he called me Chon, which means spoon. He called me Spoon. So I was sweeping leaves. He said, spoon, spoon. So I squatted down, and he said, Sabai mai. So I've been used to this form of Sabai di, Mahiru Sabai di, and he just said Sabai. So I said Sabai, yes, I'm well, I'm comfortable. And then he had this kind of glint in his eye, and he said, Sabai di mai. Yes. So I knew there was a trap there, but I couldn't see what it was. So I said, Sabai di ka. And then his face, it was transformed, like from this kind, compassionate grandfather figure, just suddenly, it's like a monster, it's really frightening. And then he said, Sabai di mai di. And then he walked off. So he'd given me this teaching, in the first few words of Thai everyone learns. They're so skilled. And just leave you thinking, what was that? What did that mean? Like, what's that all about? And so you start to meditate on it, think it through. And I am someone who adapts to any situation pretty well. And within a short time, I was feeling pretty good at Wat Pa Pong. Even though, I was completely new to me, and the climate, and the eating one meal a day, and all these different, getting up at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, and not going to bed till 10, 11 at night, all this kind of, it was tough life. But yeah, I felt good, But what Ajahn Cha was teaching me was, Sabai, yeah, okay. But if you're Sabai di, if you're not experiencing any kind of stress in your life at all, it means you're taking it too easy. That if you're going against the grain of the defilements and you're really doing the work, you're going to feel a certain amount of stress. And if you're not, then that probably means that you're just going with the flow of defilements too much. But the putting forth of effort, then, that requires intelligence, doesn't it? To review and to preview, like you're going into any circumstance, situation. Just ask yourself, what are the kind of defilements or mental toxic states that tend to arise in this kind of situation? Yeah, I tend to lose my mindfulness when this is going on, or when that happens, or when that person comes in, or when this happens. So you start to develop this, this list, and so you make this specific goals. You say, yeah, I tend to lose my mindfulness when I'm eating, or I tend to use my mindfulness after some activity where I just feel like relaxing, and I tend to lose it a bit then, or everyone's different. But you start to focus on particular areas rather than saying, oh, some days I'm just a heedless guy. You say, no, be more specific. What are the causes and conditions? And then how can you protect your mind against those? And simply making that intention to be more mindful at that particular time, day, or in that particular situation, that you're already creating the supportive conditions for being heedful. Because you've seen the importance of being heedful there, you've seen the suffering or the problems that arise from not being heedful, and you've made this firm intention, which supports mindfulness, because mindfulness means recollecting, bringing to mind. So if something is right in the front of your mind, and it's something that you give importance to, you can bring it to mind much more than if it's just a general kind of, yeah, I'm trying to be more heedful. But it's not specific enough, and it's not present enough that you can use it, just bring it to mind immediately. So that spending a little time just reviewing particular weaknesses and problems and difficulties and during the day, and just preparing yourself for those. And then also there's afterwards, just seeing how did you do with that. Is there some other skillful means you might use? But in the case that you do lose it, and you're heedless, then you also need a second kind of effort. You need to have specific techniques and methods and attitudes and so on to reduce or to eliminate that. You've got to say, what kind of positive mental states can I seek to cultivate in this circumstance? So like patience is a good one. Patience is not a virtue which is much praised these days. So much of modern progress seems to be designed to take away the need for patience. You can do this so much quicker now. You've got so much quicker connection. It's so much easier. So much. This idea that the quicker everything becomes, the more convenient it is, the better. That's a weird idea. It's so normal for us to think that. Is that really true? Yeah, we don't like to be held up unnecessarily for no reason. But, we've become so accustomed to instant gratification now that patience becomes harder and harder for us. If you had been somewhere with a really good Wi-Fi connection, and you go somewhere with a phone-up connection, oh, come on, it's so slow. Or even if the Wi-Fi connection is not very fast. And our expectations of the world to respond to our will, just change so much. We have more convenience and access to instant gratification than kings and queens and emperors, even 100 years ago. So sometimes making a goal of being patient and cultivating patience is something which is so helpful. If you remember, the Buddha says in the Ovada Patimokkha that patience is the patient endurance, forbearance, is the supreme incinerator of defilements. So it's like the one key virtue. If you have patient endurance, then you can expect that most of the rest will come with practice. But if you lack that one, then many of the other virtues and practices are built on sand. They won't stand up. So seeing the value and the beauty and the nobility of mindfulness, awareness, and seeing this dukkha, the suffering and problems within yourself, your relationship to others, and your life in the world, through lacking that awareness, then your commitment to it, your interest in it becomes stronger, and then you're giving yourself specific goals and reminding yourself to be aware of specific areas of life or specific times when you tend to lose it.
Ajahn, like you explained earlier that we don't know how much time we have. We all know that, but most of the time I encounter the idea of because time is too short, you don't know how much time is left, so let's enjoy your life. And enjoy means like party, doing those things.
Yeah, eat, drink, and be merry. Well, here you see the role of importance of what we call mundane right view. So right view or samadhi is sort of the ordinary mundane level, and then the supramundane or spiritual level. On the mundane level, we have this confidence in the law of karma and the process of rebirth. So this life is short and valuable because it's short, it's unpredictable, but it's not the only life. And at the end of this life, we'll be reborn. And the rebirth will be conditioned by what we've done in this life and the qualities that we've developed. So if we live like an animal, we take an animal rebirth because we enjoy the pleasures of the body so much, the mind becomes coarse. And if the mind is coarse, it will look for a coarse vessel, look for a coarse rebirth. So eating, drinking, and being merry provides some short-term pleasure, but it leads to long-term suffering. So this is the understanding that we have. But even from short-term view, say, do these pleasures really make you so happy? And just look at the whole process of forming a desire for something, and then chasing after it, enjoying it, and then if it's some possession, then having to take care of it and protect it, and then eventual separation from it. So if you see this whole thing as like a graph, like this, the actual moment of peak enjoyment is just one little dot in this whole process. You say, is it really worth all the suffering leading up to it and suffering afterwards? And if you look very closely, then maybe it's not so clear at all. But something we can observe with sensual pleasures, is eat, drink, and be merry, is that you have to constantly be increasing the input to get the same intensity of experience. So like with a drug, we start off with one pill, but after some time, it doesn't work. You have to take 2 pills to get the same response from 1 pill, and then 3 pills to get. So you're constantly having to increase the intensity to get the same pleasure. So this is a real danger of it, or weakness of it. Secondly, how much can you enjoy anything? For how long can you enjoy something? You could go singing and dancing and all these things, but how long can you do it before you need to have something to eat, you need to go to the toilet, you need to have some sleep? It's not like you can sustain this happiness for. There was one time a king, he came across the Buddha, just sleeping under his robe by the side of the road. And he said, "Oh, you poor Lord, how can you live like this? That's just so inappropriate for a great teacher like that to be living under a tree." You know, I live in so much luxury. You know, I've got this beautiful palace, bed, and all this, you know, decorations and paintings and everything, food. And the Buddha said, you're there, but what happens if you get really greedy, you know? How do you feel? You get really angry with somebody. How do you feel? You know, when you get really anxious or fearful, and do you sleep well? You know, even that expensive bed with gold tapestries and all this, you know, do those things help you to sleep well if your mind is in turmoil? The Buddha said, I can cross my legs, close my eyes, and go into a happy state of mind and sustain it for 7 days and 7 nights. So he said, who should be sorry for who? You know? But this idea that somehow the consumption of material things and experiences is like the real world, and that's what really makes you happy. It doesn't stand up to any real analysis, does it? If your happiness is dependent on your eyes and your ears, you know, what happens when they start to go? You know, you get like my age. If I have any glasses, I can't read anything anymore. If your hearing starts to go, you're not so strong anymore. Or you're very attached to your sense of your body as being beautiful, attractive, or handsome. Yeah, and then suddenly you look in the mirror and you know you're not so beautiful anymore. You're not so handsome anymore. How does that feel? You know, it's nobody's interested in your body anymore. You know, that's if that's your main source of happiness and pleasure, that's awful. People suffer from that terribly. What happens if you get sick? Some years ago, I was in San Francisco and I was speaking with a man who was in his 30s, and he'd represented the United States in the Olympics, and he was a brilliant sportsman, athlete. You know, he spent all his life in athletic pursuits, and he was good. He was really good, you know, world class. And then at the age of 30-something, he got cancer, and he was in hell. It wasn't just the physical thing. It wasn't, you know, cancer's awful, but what really created the hell in his mind was the separation from his former life. All his sense of identity, who he is, his pride in his life, and his sense of who I am, was based on being an athlete. And now he's thin and skinny and no energy, and it's impossible for him to deal with that. So once you create this sense of I am the body, or I am, you know, life exists in the enjoyment of pleasures, then it's very unwise. It doesn't work out that well. And a lot of, in fact, you know, I was saying to Thai people is that, you know, we should be more materialist than we are. I don't think people are materialist enough. You know, because let's say if a woman's going to pick a handbag, you know, if you're a handbag and you're a materialist, then you would think, well, what size of handbag do I need for what I put in it? What kind of material do I need, which will last a long time, but it looks nice? So, you know, you take these really practical considerations. So you have 2 bags, and they're same quality, same size, equally attractive. One is $100 and one is $1,000. You take the $100 one because you're a materialist. But if you see that the $1,000 one has the name, like of a famous company on it, and you choose the $1,000 one because you want people to see that you're one of the people that has enough money to buy one of these, and you're in that club, that's not materialism, is it? You want a certain kind of feeling. You want people to look at you in a certain kind of way. So a lot of these essential pleasures, you know, it's not just the pleasure itself, but it's the mental aspect of, I have this pleasure that other people don't. I have this car that other people can't afford. I wear these clothes that only really rich people wear. I'm in the club of special people. So people want to feel that they're special or belong to a special club, or that something that they can show off and make them feel special. That's not materialism, is it? We call it materialism. And a lot of time what people want is a feeling that their life is going somewhere. You know, when people make money, often, to be frank, they've got more money than they need that they would ever spend. You know, there are people in a society like this. Why do they always want to make more and more? What for? It's not material wealth, because however they lived, however heedlessly they lived, they couldn't spend it all. But what people want is this feeling that my life is going somewhere, it's getting better every day. My stocks are going up. So people are, you know, very wealthy, you know, they make a small loss. Sometimes you see someone with huge amount of money, and then maybe a servant steals $10 or something, and they're angry, they're so angry, you know, because it's not that the money itself, it's the sense of loss. Yeah, I made a loss, and I want to increase and grow and expand, and that's what makes me feel good. And this is what we call bhava tanha. So there's like three kinds of craving. There's a craving for sensual pleasures, but more subtly this sense of craving for some idea, some sense of self, to go on, to keep going, to keep expanding. So the more we look at this, the third kind is wanting to get rid of things we don't like, things threatened by things we don't like. So the more we look at this with our mind, with meditation, it's not that we say, now I'm a Buddhist, you know, I've got to be a good boy or a good girl and not do all those things anymore. You just begin to see that, you know, it's a joke. It's a not a funny joke, but it's weird, crazy. You know, the more how is it that people fall for that? You know, just as you see people with these belong to these really weird cults, and you think, how could people believe that? Then you see people with their fancy clothes and their cars and just flaunting them about. You know, if you've got it, flaunt it. You think, how could they settle for that? You know, how could you exchange this human life for that? You know, for money, for a yacht, for a car, for an expensive suit of clothes. I mean, it's just, this is where samvega arises. You know, the Buddha says this human life is so wonderful, so difficult to be born as a human being, and to throw it away just for money or for wealth. It's a sad thing. So when we see the looking with that calm, clear mind at these truths, like the fact that life is uncertain, could disappear at any time, we could be separated from all those we love, all the things we love at any time, then with a clear mind you think, I've really got to make the best of this time. Really got to do as much good and to purify my heart as much, to give as much as I can give, to share as much as I can share, to develop parami and what we call noble treasures in our heart, because when we leave this world, all we take with us are the qualities of our heart. Those are our traveling companions. Everything else just goes to dust. So the wise person, other than becoming heedless, reflecting on impermanence and uncertainty, becomes heedful. It's a major cause for heedfulness. Somebody else got a question? Yeah.
I do. I have kind of a specific question. What is the Buddhist take on abortion?
Abortion? Abortion is considered to be the taking of life, taking of a human life.
At any stage?
Yes. But the having said that, obviously the karma created by taking a life in the very first stages or just after conception would be obviously far less than aborting a fetus in the third trimester or whatever, which would be the worst. But it is considered to be a living being, nevertheless. Now and for this reason, if a monk was to recommend a laywoman to have an abortion, and she was to have an abortion on the advice of a monk, that monk would have committed the most serious offense. He would be expelled from the monkhood because he would be considered to be guilty of murder, or by the monastic standards, be responsible for the death of a human being. In the case that terrible cases of a young girl being abused by a father, stepfather, or being raped and so on, and becoming pregnant, then the living being that is takes birth because of that is still a living being. But a monk would advise the woman involved to really think this through at great length, to discuss it with parents, teachers, friends, and not to make a hasty decision. And then after period of reflection and investigation and looking at things from one, then if she should choose to have an abortion, then that's her responsibility. And there is karma created, but sometimes as human beings we have to take on a certain amount of karma. So it's not like don't do this ever, you go to hell, or using that sort of finger, but it's saying this is it is taking of a human life, even if it's in the first trimester or in the first days or day after conception. And that for that reason, that karma is created, you should really think about this really deeply before you do it. But in the end, it's the responsibility and it's the decision of the person who's carrying the young baby.
So the difference between at first conception and at the trimester is just the consciousness of this being?
Yes, there's a growth of consciousness and more faculty, human faculties are developing. So it's a more significant cutting off of so that there is this theme running through the law of karma and the way that it's explained. For instance, if we were to take the life of a human being generally, then that's very bad karma. But if it was a parent or an enlightened being, the karma would be magnified incredibly. If there's someone who's been kind to us and has helped us in our life, then the karma would be more serious than if it was, say, the enemy on a battlefield. Still, the karma is created, but there is a difference in the intensity and the karmic consequence of the action. Similarly, the amount of planning, the amount of anger and hatred and prejudice, the amount of negative mental states involved in that volition would also have a karmic result. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, but still a tough.
Yeah.
Regardless, you're creating bad karma.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's never acceptable.
Well, I mean, ideally you don't create that kind of karma, but I think it's the flexibility is you hear about these awful cases of a 11, 12-year-old girl abused by a stepfather or or let, all these terrible examples of rape by someone with AIDS or some, all these terrible things. And what's your position on this? And the position is really make your mind calm, think through this, seek advice from others. Don't just act on emotion, really think it through. And then when you weighed everything up, make a decision, take responsibility for it.
I think maybe expanding on the question earlier, all in life we're faced with decisions, some easier than others. So some easy one we can easily see they create suffering and we try not to act on them. But some other bigger decisions we cannot foretell what's going to happen. So how can we use wisdom to help us make the decision?
Well, wisdom is focused on right from the initial level, the sort of the listening, thinking level, right up to the highest level, vipassana and insight leading to liberation. It is always focused on impermanence, dukkha, anatta. And one shorthand expression of that is this Thai we say, "mai nae," it's like it's not sure, it's not sure. And Ajahn Cha, my teacher, was always saying, when you like something, you tell yourself, "mai nae." You don't like something, it's mai nae. And when you're happy, it's mai nae. When you're unhappy, it's mai nae. When you're excited, it's mai nae. When you're depressed, it's mai nae. So you're constantly reminding yourself, this is an impermanent conditioned state. So when we decide to put effort into something or to make a decision, take a path in our life, it's always a risk. We can never have 100% guarantee. We can say, yeah, it's pretty sure, but there's always room for some doubt or some mai nae. So that's the wisdom right there, not having those kind of expectations. I say it has to be like this, it has to work out like this, because you know that our own input or our own efforts are only one condition. This is called web of conditions. And there's no necessary link between your own conduct and the result, because you're not alone in the world. If you're living on a desert island maybe, or in an empty room, maybe it would be almost exclusively you, but we don't live like that. So that putting effort into the causes, but letting go of the results of things is a wise habit. So let's say you're working in some kind of an organization and you put in a lot of really hard work, hard hours, but you can't expect that that's necessarily going to have a good result. If, for instance, if the organization is corrupt and advancement in the organization is not dependent on intelligence or merit, but on favors and relationships between people in the organization, your work might not end up anywhere. Or if you have colleagues who are jealous of you and are able to prevent your work being as successful as it might be of sabotaging it, same thing, really good work, no good result. Or maybe you're working in a company and you're all working really well and you're harmonious and everything, and then there's something happens in the economy of Argentina or a country you've never even heard of, and that has, with the modern economic system, things that happen in countries thousands of miles away can have an instantaneous effect, and suddenly you have no market for your product, or there's some economic problem in your company because nothing to do with you. So this is a simple example of the fact that whatever we do, we don't have any guarantees. But we still put forth effort because that's what we want to do, but we don't expect that it has to turn out or it should turn out in a certain way. If it does, great, but we don't have those expectations. I've been telling this story a few times recently, and it's a well-known story, but I think it's such a wonderful one to bear in mind about the man who's walking, or woman walking along the beach every morning for exercise or running. One day finds thousands and thousands of starfish washed up on the beach, and they're all struggling and they're all dying. And what can he do? So he picks up a starfish, throws it in the water. Another one, another one. A friend comes down and says, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm helping these starfish." He said, "You're crazy. There's thousands, and what can you do? Waste of time. You're not going to achieve anything, just you by yourself." And so he picks up a starfish and he said, "Well, I helped this one, and I helped this one, and I helped this one." You see, the idea being, if you look at all the things you could do or should do, it's, what, you don't even feel like starting, you can't make an impression on that huge task. And so you tend towards inactivity. But then if you take it one by one, there may be thousands of starfish I can't save, but I can save this one, and I can save this one. And you've only got two hands, you've only got one body, there's only 24 hours in a day, 365 days in a year, so you do what you can do. And you don't expect that the number of starfish should radically reduce, or that you're making an impact in the big picture of things, but you're doing what you can do moment by moment. And that's your joy and your happiness and your wholesome pride in yourself that I did what I could do.
Would you please speak about anatta or not self?
Yes, okay. So anatta, first off, is that it's simply pointing out that something you think is so is not really so. So there's not this kind of mystic state of anatta or something that you have to penetrate and realize. So my analogy here is, let's say everybody or a lot of people believe that this building is radioactive. Okay, so what would we do? Well, we get a Geiger counter, and then you walk through the main hall and into the bathrooms and the storerooms and the guest rooms, and you got every single room, and then onto the ceiling and in the roof. And after you've covered every single square inch of the building, there's not been a single click, you can conclude there is no radioactivity in this building. So here, radioactivity is like self, or atta, and the lack of self or atta is anatta. So the Buddha is saying, look in your body, look in your feelings, look in your perceptions, look in your emotions, look in your sense consciousness with your Geiger counter. Is there any self there? And the Buddha says, suggests that there isn't, but challenges you to look for yourself. So why is the sense of self so strong? Well, for many reasons, but one of the areas in which it's strong is the area in which we have some control. So I think it's quite easy to see that, say, sweating is not self. Okay, because we go out in the heat of the day, nobody wants to sweat, prefer not to sweat, but the body sweats. So many functions of the body, just digestion, you don't have any conscious control over the digestion. There are all kinds of automatic functions of the body over which we have no control. So one of the key indicators of not self is lack of control. And the idea of self is bound up with the self of ownership or power. So the suggestion is, if there is a self, it should have power over the things that over life. So most simply, if there is a self here, then the self should be able to say, don't get old, don't get sick, don't get a cold, don't get a runny nose, don't get old, don't die. If there was a self, it should have that kind of power. Just as if you have a property, you have power to do with it what you want. It's your house, you can paint the wall, or you can put up a picture, or you can take down a picture, you can put furniture in it, take furniture. Why? Because it's your house. Who's going to tell you not to? That's your right as a householder. But if there's a self, then the idea of self is that it's something that has power. It acts, it's acted upon. But then, why is it that we don't have any power? But then we do in a certain area, don't we? A certain very limited area. Let's take, I want to lift my arm, I can lift my arm. But I want to lift my arm and I want to keep it there for an hour. I can't do that. I can act on attention, but only as much as the nature of things allows. But there's that little area in which we can say, I'm going to do something and do something. So you say, I want to hold my breath. Okay, I hold my breath. And I can do that, act of will, determined to hold my breath and hold my breath. But I can't do it for very long. My body won't let me do that. So the looking at the ways in which our body, our minds are out of control and not within conscious control is an insight into anatta. And also seeing that even in those areas which we can express control, it's only within the parameters provided by the nature of things. Now, another conditioning factor for the belief in self is language. Because we have this one word, I, and we use it for almost every aspect of our life. So we can say, I have white skin. I am feeling good. I remember you. I think this is a good idea. I heard that. We use all these different things, and we use this word I. And common sense tells us that there's this one thing called I. I have white skin. I have a good feeling. I have a memory. I have a thought. I have emotion. I have a sense consciousness. But when you look at what's going on with a clear mind, you see, no, there is skin. Skin has a color. There is a feeling arising and passing away. There's a perception arising and passing away. There's thought. There's emotion. There's just a stream of phenomena arising and passing away according to causes and conditions. And the feeling of being the owner of that is something that we superimpose upon it. It's not that there is this being, this who I really am, standing behind experience and controlling it. There is simply experience. And that sense of being the experiencer is not standing back from the flow, but is in itself part of the flow. So I was explaining this morning about rebirth, about the candle flame, this idea of this process taking on different forms of manifestations. But so it's not, anatta is not denying, we're not saying there's nothing there, but saying that things exist in a way different than we imagine. And seeing things as function of causes and conditions is the work of wisdom. So, if you have let's say you have a cup of coffee, okay, so you've got, let's say it's instant coffee, for the sake of argument, you have instant coffee, and you've got some hot water, and you've got some sugar, let's say, and you've got some milk. So you've got four things: instant coffee, sugar, milk, and water. So you drink coffee, and bitter. So I don't think anybody says, oh, it's my karma from past life, I get to drink a bitter coffee. Oh, poor old me. I'll have to do some ceremony or other. So next time I get a No, which your wisdom tells you that the taste of that coffee is a composite. It's arising from the relationship of those ingredients. And as you know, that the presence of bitterness indicates absence of sugar. So you think, oh, I need another cup of sugar, I need another spoonful of sugar. You know, or if it's too sweet, you could maybe add some more water or some more milk. So there are certain things you can do to that cup of coffee, but they're limited by the nature of the coffee and the the ingredients. So we apply the same kind of vision to life, and you begin to be able to separate and to distinguish between those areas in which you do have a certain amount of control and those areas which you don't, and try to influence those that you do and to accept and deal with those that you don't. So somebody's very hurtful, you know, they shout at you or swear at you, you know. So if you think in terms of selves, you say, how could he be so mean? How could he be so nasty? He shouldn't be, and all these thoughts. But seeing things in terms of anatta, is seeing things in terms of causes and conditions. You think, well, isn't anger a horrible thing? You know, when anger takes over the human mind, then it leads to that kind of speech and that kind of behavior. And if someone is lacking in mindfulness, lacking in this mental culture, it's like their mind's an open door, and any mental state can come in and take over the mind. And that person has no awareness, he doesn't know how to protect the mind from negativity. Negativity, in this case anger, manifested in that mind and resulted in angry speech. So seeing the problem, behavior of other people, not as that person is so mean, that person is so cute, but seeing that this is this causes and conditions, and being able to see things in terms of causes and conditions. I'm sure you'll have heard that Venerable Kitiko, Kantian's teacher, disrobed. It's a huge issue and news in all the newspapers and TV stations in Thailand. And shortly after it happened, I went to the foundation, which some of you have been to, I think, in Bangkok, and gave a talk for all his disciples, both the monks and the lay people. And I said, it's inevitable that we develop some feeling for teachers, because without teachers we wouldn't know the Dhamma, we wouldn't develop in this way. We feel gratitude towards them. And often teachers are very, they're wise and they're kind, compassionate, and so on. And we just find them so inspiring. And then if they disrobe or they die, we feel bereft and hurt and grieving. I said, look, if we see a great teacher, just ask yourself, what exactly is going on here? So why do you feel so inspired? Oh, well, because he's so kind, because so compassionate, he's so wise, or she's so wise, or whatever. But look, what's really inspiring is the quality itself. What we're really inspired by is goodness. We're inspired by kindness. We're inspired by wisdom. We're inspired by patience. And the teacher is a vessel for those qualities. And the vessel can break, the vessel can disappear, but those qualities don't disappear. They're universal qualities. The teacher is someone who's just able to manifest those qualities in such a clear way that we can see them and be inspired by them and try to develop them in ourselves. So we're not seeing things even as a teacher and a student. we see in anatta reflection, we see these beautiful qualities manifesting themselves in that particular person, or in that body-mind, or in that vessel. And when we see things like that, the personal attachments start to fade away, and the sense of loss, when someone disappears from our life, disappears because we know that wisdom didn't go anywhere, patience didn't go anywhere, loving kindness didn't go anywhere, wisdom didn't disrobe. These are universal qualities, and not only did not disappear, but they're already starting to appear in our own hearts, and that we can cherish them and develop them further. And if we practice well enough, then they can manifest within us in such a way as that we're inspiring other people, and we can inspire other people with this anatta reflection without getting puffed up and thinking, oh, I'm a big teacher now, everybody knows my name, everywhere I go people want to take photographs of me. Don't think like that. You think, yeah, this is the beauty and the power of the Dhamma, and to the extent to which the teacher manifests or expresses the Dhamma, and he's a teacher, and he's a vessel for the Dhamma. But as I say, vessels are fragile, and they're not always reliable, but the Dhamma is reliable. So we're always looking at the Dhamma rather than the individual. Okay, I think I'm going to have to end at this point because I have an engagement. Lovely to see all of you, and I'm very glad to see such a diligent, sincere group. I see Venerable Tien or Kitiko quite regularly these days, and I'm very pleased with him, and I think he's a very good monk and very sincere and dedicated in his monk's life. And he told me all about you, and so I'm glad to have the chance to meet all of you and to be able to tell him when I see him next time that I did see you. And I wish you the very best in your practice of dana and giving, of sila and precepts, and of cultivation of all the wholesome dhammas, and most especially of wisdom. May you all be well.